Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Just Lean Into It, Getting the Most Out of Your Stepladder, the final webinar in our 2023 National Ladder Safety Month webinar series. My name is Joe Zagrabic, and I'm here from the American Ladder Institute. We are excited to be joined by Mike Van Bree, Director, Product Safety and Engineering at Louisville Ladder. Before we begin, a few quick announcements. The American Ladder Institute is a not-for-profit association dedicated to promoting the safe use of ladders. Its members are affiliated with the ladder and ladder component manufacturing industry, and ALI is the American National Standards Institute approved developer of ladder safety standards. National Ladder Safety Month, observed in March and spearheaded by the American Ladder Institute, is the only program dedicated exclusively to promoting ladder safety at home and work. This year is the 7th anniversary of National Ladder Safety Month, but ladder safety is important every day. Partnering with ALI for today's webinar is Louisville Ladder. Louisville Ladder is committed to ladder safety through its innovative products and educational programming. All attendees will remain muted for the program. At the end of the presentation, attendees can ask questions by typing them into the questions feature. This webinar is being recorded, and we will share the recording with all attendees. This recording will also be hosted online at laddersafetymonth.com. With that, I'll pass it over to Mike.
Hello, Joe. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Appreciate your participation here in this program today. As the title suggests, we're talking about step ladders today, and getting the most out of your step ladder starts with using it in a safe manner. And I'd like to begin by talking a little bit about some of the things that we know can go wrong with your step ladder use. So we'll talk about some significant accident causes, and these are what has been identified through ANSI, A14, and OSHA. It's broken down into a couple of categories. The first category is we're going to talk about instability of the step ladder. And so that's, for example, that the feet are not supported on a firm level surface as instructed. The ladder's not fully open with the spreaders locked, all 4 feet on the ground, and that you're maybe positioned a little too far from the work. So users' medical conditions can also lead to potential problems with the stability of the ladder. If you're standing above the highest standing levels that are recommended, you can again get yourself into some stability troubles. Overreaching is another one that's particularly to the side is important, because that orientation of a step ladder is the least stable orientation. Transitioning to or from another surface. Step ladders are typically not intended for that purpose unless special precautions are taken to secure the ladder. If you're handling heavy or unstable objects, your stability can be compromised. And then if you're applying extreme loads, again, to that side direction, these are all things that can lead to instability. Before we move on, I guess just highlighting the first 4 points here are in red. That's for a particular reason. We're going to come back to that a little bit later in the presentation. So those 4 significant accident causes, as identified through ANSI and OSHA, we want to stay a little bit focused on those in this presentation here today. The next category would be sliding accidents. So things that can lead to a stepladder sliding would be an uneven or a sloped surface, a surface that's perhaps slippery because of contaminants, ice, snow, water, mud. Those are the sorts of things that may create a slippery surface. Unstable support surface, and what does that mean? That could be perhaps a surface that's too soft, so you may have your feet settling into the ground. You could use this ladder as a leaning ladder, as the illustration, the picture at the side of the slide demonstrates. That is a misuse of a step ladder to lean it into another object. If it's positioned too far from the work, You've heard that before on the earlier slide. That can also lead to a sliding event. Worn, missing, contaminated feet, overreaching in that side direction again. Transition to other surfaces is also an event that can lead to the ladder sliding away from you as you push off going to another surface. Then applying those extreme loads would be a potential way to upset the footing and lead to sliding with your stepladder. One of the next things after we talk about the causes, how do we make sure that we have the right stepladder for the job? Let's jump into and go through the considerations on choosing or selecting the correct stepladder. The material is going to be important. Are you working on or around electricity? Because that's going to play into the selection of what material you would want to choose. A clean, dry fiberglass stepladder is going to be the best situation if you're working with electricity. Contaminants, whether that's water, paint, things of that sort, even on a fiberglass ladder, can lead to some conductivity. So you want to make sure you're using a clean ladder as well. Aluminum ladders can be a great choice if you don't have that electricity concern. So beyond material, we want to get into the load capacity of the ladder. Is this a ladder that is suitable for the weight of the user to do the job safely? There's a couple of things to consider in that regard. You have to know what the duty rating is. The label on the side rail is going to identify the load capacity of the ladder. Louisville Ladder also includes that as a printout on the top cap. You can see that it is circled here as well. So the things to consider are your weight, that's the obvious, but you also need to make sure that you're taking into account the weight of any tools, equipment, and other objects that you may be handling while you're on the ladder. Maybe you didn't, somebody hands something up to you. You want to make sure that you don't exceed the duty rating or the load capacity. Next thing that we need to consider is the size. We want to make sure that we're taking into account the height of the work to be performed. So a key point to understand is that ladder size, when we're talking about step ladders, is really defined by the length of the rail, the fiberglass or the aluminum side rail. It's not indicating the highest standing level. In the example here, we're talking about an 8-foot step ladder, so that would indicate that you've got 8 feet of side rail length by definition, but your highest standing level, because of the steps and top cap that you're not to stand on, as well as the slope, the climbing slope of the ladder, leaves you with a highest standing level of 5 feet 8. So quite a difference from 8 feet. So again, you just want to make sure you consider that. So you are certainly not to be standing on that top cap, as I mentioned, or the step below the top cap. The highest standing level, user height, and approximately 1 foot of reach is what is typically used to consider the size. So in other words, back to that 5'8" example of an 8-foot step ladder, you would then need to add into that your height and approximately a foot of reach if your task allows for you to work above your head. If you need it to be in front of you, you have to obviously use a little bit lower numbers. So understanding the height of the work that you need to do in consideration with these ladder use factors is certainly something that you need to pre-plan before doing your work. The next thing I'd like to kind of go through is which style of step ladder is going to be best for your job. So when we talk about step ladders, we typically think of the traditional A-frame step ladder that has steps on one side, has the non-climbing rear assembly, similar to what you see in the photo here on the right. There's also trestle ladders, or sometimes called double front or mechanics ladders. Those are ladders that have steps on both sides instead of a step section and a rear section. It has two step sections. There are platform ladders that have a platform at the highest allowable standing level. There are tripod ladders. There are leanable step ladders, and that's actually what we're looking at here on the photo at the right. That is an approved designed ladder for leanable use. There are also leanable platform ladders. So let's kind of run through the features or the characteristics of each one of those to help choose the right style. So the traditional A-frame ladder, that's a self-supporting portable ladder. So in other words, it stands on its own on all 4 feet. These traditionally have top caps where you can store your tools for added utility while you're working, somewhere to put your parts, your tools, that kind of thing. And it's just a tried and true design that's been around for a very long time. So a very good product in the right circumstances. The next style is the trestle or the double front with the steps on both sides. So the photo here at the right shows that both sides can be used simultaneously. We see the users installing a garage door opener in this example. The stated load capacity of these ladders are per side. So if this was a 300-pound rated ladder, it would be suitable for use by a 300-pound user on each side. Let's jump over to the platform ladder, and that, as the name implies, gives you that large platform that you have at the highest standing level, and that gives you the ability to provide full foot support while you're doing your work. So you can work facing to the rear of it and to the sides. The pinnacle gate accessory would close off that open side if you wanted to have 360-degree working opportunities. Without the pinnacle gate, Louisville does not recommend working facing the step sections, facing that open side where you could inadvertently fall from the ladder. It would, if you're facing the open side, it does not allow you to support your body with 3 points of support. Typically, you would want to be leaning into the rails or the top cap or contacting the gate for that awareness and registry with your body, as opposed to just standing on your 2 feet. Next style, I guess we brought up earlier, is the tripod ladder. Tripod ladders are unique in the sense that they only have one rear leg. It gives you some utility in circumstances such as we see here, where you can place that third leg through a stud wall at a construction site, which allows you closer access to your work than a traditional step ladder. And it does allow you to have the orientation in the more stable direction where you're looking at the work, as opposed to working to the side to get closer to it. That design also includes what's called a center pull spreader brace that allows you to open that back leg and still have that spreader in place to support the setup of the ladder. The climbing section is wider as well. So because of the single back leg instead of a rear assembly per se, you do have a little bit more working area, so it can be comfortable in that regard to have a little bit wider area to stand. Let's jump into the leanable step ladder that we mentioned. So what you're seeing here is the Louisville Ladder cross step design. This was the first leanable step ladder configuration that was introduced in 2016 to the market. So it's been out for a while now. You may have seen these, you may not have, but it definitely adds some utility by allowing you to now safely use the step ladder as also a leaning ladder. What does that mean? Why are traditional step ladders, the traditional A-frame step ladders, not to be used in a leaning configuration? Well, the testing is different. The safety requirements of a self-supporting step ladder and a non-self-supporting leanable ladder are different. So the foot design and construction needs to meet the requirements of the leaning ladder, the non-self-supporting mode, so that you don't have a slide out situation. There are dual latches that keep the rear assembly closed. If you see the step ladder configuration on the rear assembly, you see those two black latches. Those are what secure the front assembly and the rear assembly together, because one of the other hazards is those rear legs. Looking at the photo on the right, those rear legs, if they are to fall open and into contact with the ground, that can upset the footing of the ladder and lead to a slide out. The ladder does also have a top cap, the Pro Top, which keeps the tools where you need them. There's an integrated rubber surface on the back that allows this to be leaned into the walls, corners, internal corners, external corners, and onto poles, a round pole, for example. This is going to let you work closer to your task. You also probably noticed the bright green top cap and feet. That's deliberate. So this is what we call the lean green technology, to make it clear that your work site is compliant with OSHA's expectations. Ordinarily, like I said earlier, traditional A-frame ladders are not to be used in a leaning configuration, and that can lead to an OSHA citation. So this allows somebody, whether it be your job site safety person, or if it is a person from OSHA, for example, it allows you to pretty quickly identify that this is a ladder that is specifically designed and constructed for this leaning application. Similar to the leaning step ladder, we also have the leaning platform ladder. I apologize, I see I have a typo on the screen here, but that's the leanable platform ladder. We have the cross pinnacle, and that can be used safely as a platform ladder and a leaning platform ladder. And the demonstrations of that are depicted in the photos here to the right. That platform at the highest level gives you the good foot support, gives you the ability to work, facing and to the sides, and get you a little closer to your work. And if you need to turn around and work in a different orientation toward the open side, the climbing side, that pinnacle gate accessory works here as well to ensure that you don't inadvertently step off the platform into the open. So I already mentioned it allows you to work closer to the task, and we've spoken about the lean green technology, which is also incorporated with the cross pinnacle leaning platform ladder as well. So in summary, what's really important is to choose that proper tool for the job to enhance your safety and your productivity. And choosing a leanable step ladder allows you some extra utility and stay in compliance with the instructions and help avoid several of the known significant accident causes. As I promised you at the beginning, we'll run through those again quickly with the things that were highlighted in red. So ladder feet not supported on a firm level surface. By being able to use this on only 2 feet, that that can account for the rocking or the instability of a step ladder that's set on a surface that's not perfectly flat. The ladder is not fully opened or locked. Well, this accounts for that hazard. As I explained, those hazards are considered and addressed through the use of the latches. Another one of the significant accident causes, known accident causes, was all 4 feet not being supported. In other words, being used in a leaning orientation, and this is specifically allowing that. Position too far from the work, you can be more close to your work at hand. And saying it very specifically, the use as a leaning ladder is permitted here as opposed to being a violation of the safety standards. So are we ready to climb? Not exactly. There's a few next steps that we should cover before we take the ladder and go to work. So safe ladder use is really something that is more than just right tool for the job. We want to make sure that we cover the rest of the considerations, the inspection, the setup of the ladder, and its use. So let's start with inspection. What we want to do is make sure that we do inspect that ladder before we use it so that we're not using a damaged ladder. That includes ensuring that the labels are present, secure, and legible, examining the feet for damaged or missing pads, checking the side rails and the steps for cracks, splits, dents, etc. The side rails of a ladder are effectively like a bridge beam. Those are supporting the structure. Obviously, the steps are as well when you step on each of the steps. So checking the side rails and the steps is critically important to make sure that you don't have something that's structurally compromised. You want to inspect the connections between the step and the side rail, any other hardware that is on the ladder. If it's a ladder that has bolted connections, anything, any fittings, accessories, anything that may be loose, damaged, we want to evaluate that. The spreaders should be secure, working properly and not bent. If the spreaders are bent, then that's going to make it difficult to set that ladder up on all 4 feet because it's not opening in the manner it's intended. All the bolts, rivets should be present and secure, and don't use it if they're not. And then lubricate any pivoting connections when needed so that you don't struggle to open or close the ladder. Going along with that, you want to make sure that the surfaces are clean and free of dirt, oil, grease, etc. So if you lubricated your ladder and got a little lubricant on the steps, you want to make sure to clean that up as well. So that kind of covers the inspection. Let's jump on to the ladder setup. What you want to do is, again, read and follow those on-product instructions. The ladder styles, depending on which style ladder it is, the setup and the use information can be a little bit different. And so you want to make sure you follow that and understand those differences. So what are the self-supporting setup considerations? You need to examine the environment for any hazards, such as debris, clutter, overhead obstructions that you might hit as you're taking the ladder to the job site or climb into. You want to make sure to block off the work area so people and equipment don't interfere with you and the ladder while you're trying to do your work. If there are doors around, those need to be blocked. And if put up a sign to warn others that you're working in that area. All 4 feet on the firm level surface is critical. You don't want that ladder to be rocking or teetering because you've not fully opened those spreaders and put all 4 feet onto the ground. So there we go. The spreaders are critical to making sure that this is in the open position as well. Jumping to setup, we're going to keep talking about these instructions that are on the product because they give you the information you need to make sure that you're setting it up and using the ladder properly. Some additional non-self supporting configuration considerations. Several of the things we mentioned already apply to the leanable configuration as well, but just specifically, we want to make sure that both feet are on a firm level surface. We want to make sure that the top is supported against the upper surface. If you remember, I explained that the top cap has a rubber surface on the back that provides some protection for the surface. It also provides slip resistance as well. So you want to make sure you're properly supporting that. You want to make sure that the ladder is at the correct angle, and you can certainly do that by following the instructions, making sure that the steps are in a level position and not tilted or leaning. So you place your toes against the bottom of the side rail, you stand erect, and then you adjust the angle so that you can grasp the front rail with your arms extended straight out at shoulder level. And as I said, the steps should be level and the feet should be, I say flat on the floor. As I explained earlier, these feet are a little bit curved, so flat on the floor is a little bit relative in that regard. And don't use it if it's slippery surfaces unless you've carefully secured from movement. So jumping into ladder use, we want to follow these instructions and don't use it if you have any physical limitations, any medical conditions or things like that. You want to be attentive, or if you're taking any drugs, any medications, that sort of thing. Always face into the ladder and use both hands when climbing. Lean into or hold onto the ladder so that you're maintaining 3 points of contact while climbing and while working. You want to be feeling comfortable and supported while you're climbing and while you're working from the ladder. Keep yourself close to the work and reposition as needed. So in other words, don't stretch, don't overreach to try and get a little more done. You may need to get down and reposition that ladder so that you're not overreaching and that you're able to keep your body centered between the side rails. You don't want to move ladders while you're on them. Traditionally, that's called walking the ladder. In the case of a step ladder, you'll see sometimes people will be creative and hop a leanable ladder. Those are certainly ways to get into trouble and not safe, so you don't do that. Only stand on the appropriate surfaces, so the steps and the platform, and don't climb on or off the ladder to another surface. So necessarily when you're climbing off to another surface, you're applying transition loads to the side, loads in a direction to move your body from one location to another. And so that's why it's critically important to secure the ladder if you're climbing to another surface. If you're accessing the elevated surface, you don't want to lean or push on that extended portion that's above the top support, because that can create tipping or teetering of the ladder that disrupts the feet. And you want to make sure your footwear is clean and slip resistant. So Crocs are not appropriate ladder climbing shoes, or sandals, or anything that's not a slip resistant and closed shoe. And you don't want to get into contact with electrical wires for pretty obvious reasons. Even if it's a non-conductive fiberglass ladder, that's getting into contact with electrical wires is always a bad situation. So make sure you do an assessment of the job site before trying to position your ladders at the work location. You probably know this, but only one person on the ladder unless otherwise indicated. So the Trestle Ladder we talked about earlier does allow for 2 people. And whenever it's possible, have a second person to hold onto the ladder and provide additional stability. So with that, thank you very much for your participation in this training. We've got a few photos here that might be conversation starters or things that we can talk about a little bit. So we, just looking and walking through these kind of quickly. The one on the left shows we've got a gentleman on an 8-foot ladder to the right, and he's able to work safely at that level, the highest standing level, as opposed to his coworker who's on a 6-foot ladder and standing on the top cap. So proper ladder for the job is critical there. This was a photo. The second photo is one that I snapped of a work site that I happened to come across, where you can see where you need to perhaps go up from one level to another level with multiple level roofs. That's where a leanable step ladder can actually give you some additional benefits if you've got that ability to get up onto the elevated roof by safely leaning that ladder as it's designed to be done. The 3 points of contact is critical. I'll leave the 3 points of contact to your own imagination there. The photo on the right is actually from a sales flyer for a window company that I picked up, and I couldn't find a single one of their employees that was demonstrating safe ladder use in this mailer that went out, which is unfortunate. But you can see turned backwards on a ladder. You can see straddling the top of a ladder. You don't ever want to straddle a ladder. So those are just a few things for thoughts here. What questions do we have?
Thanks, Mike. Yep, questions are already coming in, so let's jump right in. First one, can platform ladders be used when standing on the steps below the platform?
Okay, platform ladders, as we talked, have a platform at the highest standing level. That doesn't mean that that's the only area you could stand or work. So just like other step ladders, you can work at lower steps on the structure. The same is true of a platform ladder. From a design and selection standpoint, if you're doing a lot of work at a set height, that's a great time to use a platform ladder. For example, if you were installing ceiling tiles, lighting, anything where you're in a structure that has you working very consistently at one level, at one height, that's where a platform ladder is really ideal. But that doesn't mean you can't use it by standing on lower step levels as well.
Is it okay to use a step ladder outside with it set up on the ground?
Mentioned a little bit about that as we were going through here. So I think what the question is really asking is, can you put this up outside and work? It's, we say set it up on a firm level surface. So I'm envisioning, for example, setting this up out in your yard where maybe it's not smooth and perfectly flat, firm. Maybe it's there's tree roots. Maybe you're on a walkway or a gravel flower bed or those sorts of things. It could be okay to use it outside. You just have to be attentive and make sure that you're properly supporting the ladder and that it's set up in a reasonably level orientation on a sufficiently firm, stable surface. So, I mentioned tree roots. Obviously, if that's keeping a foot off the ground and you can't set your 4 feet on the ground, that would be a problem. If you're on soft earth and so now one of the ladder feet are going to push in or settle into the ground, that would be a problem because you could lose your balance and get into trouble there. Gravel, if you're on a surface that's got gravel can kind of act like marbles, can roll, can move on you unexpectedly. So there are sometimes yes, sometimes no, I guess is the answer to can you use it set up outside? Absolutely, people use step ladders outside safely all the time. But as that question is asked, I guess I'm I'm reminded of some challenges that can come up, and the general recommendation is to set on a firm level surface. A sloped driveway, that's another one that comes to mind when I answer that. The slope of the driveway, whether if you're using a leanable step ladder, whether that's a self-supporting mode where the angle of the driveway may negate the flare of the ladder. In other words, I think people recognize that ladders are designed wider at the bottom and more narrow at the top. But if you start to tip that ladder to the side, now all of a sudden one of your side rails can become vertical or even beyond vertical, so that as you climb up, the ladder could tend to tip over. Or similarly, if you're setting this step ladder, leanable step ladder, in a leaning mode, the slope of the driveway or the slope of the surface actually is can lead to a more dangerous situation with slide out, because that angle of the sloped surface, if it's sloping away from where you're leaning, that's actually effectively making your ladder setup a more shallow angle. So it's okay to use it outside, but I'm not sure exactly where that question's going, so I tried to give several examples there. If somebody has another follow-up question, just type it in the chat box, but let's move on.
Mike, is it okay to work from a step ladder using both hands, or do I need to maintain a handhold for 3 points of contact?
Again, a good question. The 3 points of contact, generally speaking, when somebody says maintain 3 points of contact, it's typically while climbing. Although maintaining 3 points of contact while working is also important. In other words, you don't want to be in a position of just balancing on your 2 feet alone while you're working from a step ladder, whether it's self-supporting on all 4 feet, a non-self supporting, a leaning position. You want to contact the rest of the ladder with either a hand or portions of your body. That's why you're not allowed to stand on the top step or top cap of a ladder. You need that additional ladder structure for stability to provide that registry, if you will, with your body and the ladder, not just balanced on your 2 feet alone. So you can certainly grab with one hand if that's permissible, but no, if it's meant, can you work with both hands? The answer is yes, you can work with both hands. You just want to make sure you have that other part of your body in contact with the ladder. An example that comes to mind on that is an electrician changing out a light fixture. You would need both hands to do that, but you do want to maintain that additional contact with the ladder through your legs, through your body, contacting the structure itself. So yes, you can work with both hands, but yes, you also need to maintain contact with the ladder and not just be balanced on your 2 feet. And that's true even with a platform ladder. You want to get your legs into the top cap, the top rail of the platform ladder. So you typically do not want to rely strictly on the balance, your own balance on your 2 feet when you're working from a ladder.
And the last question I see in the queue is, can I carry materials up the step ladder for the work to be done?
Well, as we talked a moment ago about 3 points of contact while climbing, that generally would mean your hands have to be substantially free to hold on to the ladder side rails or steps as you're climbing. I won't go so far as to say that there's not circumstances where you can be supporting an object but still also maintain your hands for example, in contact with the side rails as you're climbing up. So maintaining 3 points of contact is the critical point here. And if the materials that you need to do your job are going to interfere with that, then you need to use an alternate means to support, to carry those materials. For example, if you've got somebody else there, it can be as simple as having them hand things up to you once you're in position. It can be wearing a tool belt with the tools that you need. It could, in some instances, usually taller ladders, could mean that you're using a rope, what's sometimes called a tag line, to pull the material up to your work position once you're at elevation. So can you carefully, if it doesn't interfere with your 3 points of contact while you're climbing the ladder?
Well, it looks like that's all the questions we had. So we'd like to thank everyone for joining us today and for Mike for sharing his expertise. We hope you've enjoyed today's webinar and we appreciate your dedication to ladder safety. You can find the recording of each webinar in this series online at laddersafetymonth.com along with additional safety resources. Thank you again to Louisville Ladder for sponsoring today's webinar and to all of you for joining us and being so engaged throughout the month. Happy National Ladder Safety Month and have a great day.